I don't know about you, but most of the work I make at the moment is designed to be over almost as soon as it's begun. 30 seconds, 60 seconds, sometimes even less. A sharp opening, a quick bit of movement, a handful of pleasing imagery, a clear point, and then you're out before anyone has a chance to drift away. And I like to think that I've got pretty good at that, which I suppose the more I think about it is a little bit concerning. Because I've started to notice that even when I'm not making short form work, even when there's no client waiting, no platform to satisfy, no brief asking me to compress a whole experience into half a minute, I still behave as if there is. I'll take a shot, feel like I've got enough, and then immediately start thinking about the next one. Not because the moment is finished, not because the shot couldn't become better, but because somewhere along the line I've trained myself to move on as soon as something becomes usable. And I think that that is the problem. There's a bit of a rhythm you fall into when you spend enough time making short form work, where you start anticipating the edit before you finish shooting, where you begin to think in cuts rather than moments, and where anything that doesn't immediately justify itself starts to feel slightly suspect, as though it needs to prove its value straight away or risk being left behind. That is a bit of a subtle shift that has fairly significant consequences, because at that point you're no longer really observing what's in front of you, you're filtering it, making quick decisions about what matters and what doesn't, often before something has had the chance to become anything at all. And just to be clear, I don't think that that's inherently a bad thing. It's a genuinely useful skill to have. It's what allows you to work quickly, deliver consistently, to make things that function in the environment that they're designed for. But I have started to wonder whether that same instinct, that same bias towards speed and compression and efficiency is starting to bleed into everything else I do, even the things that don't need it, and even the things that might actually benefit from the opposite approach. And it's probably worth saying that when I talk about slowing things down, I don't mean slow motion, or high frame rates, or dreamy shots of people turning their heads at 100 frames per second, because that's something else entirely, and that's not really what I'm talking about here. What I mean is pacing. The pace at which you shoot, and the pace at which you allow something to unfold. The point at which you decide you've seen enough and move on. The point at which you decide a shot is finished, even though, very often, the thing itself is still happening. Because that's what I think I might have become a bit more aware of in my own work. That I'm not necessarily cutting moments too short because they're finished, I'm cutting them short because I've got enough. And those aren't necessarily the same thing. There is a difference between a shot being usable and a shot being complete, and I think that a whole lot of the work I make, particularly the fast commercial and social first work, has trained me to stop at usable. Because usable is efficient, usable is enough, usable gets you safely into the edit with options. But complete is different. Complete takes longer. Complete might sometimes ask you to stay with something past the point where you'd normally leave it, which is a bit uncomfortable because a part of your brain is telling you that you're wasting time, or missing something else, or being indulgent, when actually you might just be giving the moment enough room to become itself. And that really is what I've been trying to get better at. Not becoming slow just for the sake of it, not turning everything into some grand exercise in patience, not pretending that all work needs to be long and meditative and extremely pleased with itself, because that would be unbearable, but simply recognizing that speed is a tool rather than a permanent setting. And every now and then, something comes along that gives you a chance to practice that. And for me, recently, that was a slightly ridiculous, entirely brilliant micro-adventure involving an old lifeboat, a very optimistic friend, and a plan that just felt organized enough to be credible. A friend of mine, let's call him Lloyd, because his name is Lloyd, has bought an old lifeboat for £1, which for most people would be a catastrophically bad decision, though for Lloyd it's just about plausible, largely because Lloyd has this unusual ability to make improbable things happen around him. He has somehow persuaded the local dockyard, where he works, to treat the restoration as a training exercise for their apprentices, which means what should be an expensive, time-consuming, financially alarming folly has become this strange hybrid of passion project and unofficial development program, which is exactly the kind of arrangement that sounds completely absurd, until you realise that occasionally, with the right person, these things just come together. The boat itself has a fairly colourful past. It actually served locally as a relief lifeboat, working properly in these waters, doing the thing it was built to do. And more recently, it was actually bought with the intention of being used for drug running, which didn't end particularly well. The owners were arrested mid-run on another vessel, though not before doing a fair amount of damage to this one. So what Lloyd has ended up with is essentially a wounded ex-lifeboat, one engine that might work, another that definitely doesn't, and a long list of things that sit somewhere between needs attention and probably best not to think about too much yet. This boat has been lying up the coast in a little harbour called Mevagissey, which has a reputation, fairly or unfairly, of being a drinking village with a fishing problem. And the plan was simple enough in principle. head up there on a little workboat and see whether Lloyd could coax the thing into life, then either bring it down under its own power or tow it home to Falmouth if everything decided not to play ball. It's fair to say we had a reasonably competent group on board. Everyone involved is current lifeboat crew in Falmouth, which means to say that if something did go wrong, we're probably just about as well placed as you could hope to be. Although I was still fairly convinced that something probably would go wrong, because old boats with damaged engines and unclear histories do have a habit of introducing plot where none was requested. Now, in all of this, I chose not to be a particularly useful crew member. I wasn't needed in the engine department, I wasn't needed for navigation because we knew where we were going, and I wasn't even especially needed on deck because there was plenty of bodies around. The way I did contribute though was I brought a camera. And for once, because there was no pressure attached to the camera, no client, no brief, no list of deliverables, no expectation that this had to become anything in particular, just time, a bit of sea air, some people doing something slightly absurd, and a boat that looked like it had already lived several lives before we'd even arrived, that gave me something I don't always have on jobs, which is space. Space to observe, space to wait, space to let things happen in front of me rather than to constantly try and stay ahead of them, and fairly quickly I realised that although I talk about wanting to slow down, I'm not actually very well practiced at it. I would take a shot, feel like I got it, and instinctively want to move on, even though there was no reason to, even though nobody was waiting for me, and even though nothing about the situation required me to keep collecting imagery at the usual pace. And that was a bit of an interesting part, because when I actually forced myself to stay for a few more seconds, not dramatically longer, not in some theatrical act of restraint, just 5 seconds, 10 seconds, a little more than felt natural, things would often keep happening. And I think that's what I've been missing. Not the big moments necessarily, the endings of moments, the little extra pieces that happen after the point where I'd normally have decided that I'd had enough. Because if you're always shooting for the edit, and if the edit in your head is always short, then you start building everything out of fragments. And fragments can be brilliant, that's the objective obviously, particularly in social first work where energy and pace really matter, but they don't always give you much of a world to spend time inside. The other part of this, which is related, is the length of the finished work itself. Because the little film I made from that day is only a few minutes long, which in almost any traditional sense is not long at all. But for me, and with this kind of material, it is. Ordinarily, I would take the exact same footage and make a 30-second piece out of it. I would compress it, sharpen it, strip out anything that didn't immediately justify itself, find the strongest opening image, get to the point quickly, make sure it moved, made sure it had shape, made sure nobody had a chance to get bored, then probably feel quite satisfied that I'd made something efficient. And there's nothing wrong with that version. In fact, I could probably still make that version and it would probably be okay. But I think it would lose something. It would lose the feeling of the morning, the oddness of the errand, the slight absurdity of it, the sense of going somewhere with no real drama and somehow coming back with a story. Because I think that's the whole thing about slowing down. It doesn't always make the work bigger or more important, but it can make it feel more lived in, more present, more like something that actually happened rather than something that has been processed into content. Since working on the Plymouth Fishing project, I found myself becoming more interested in that kind of documentary-style storytelling. Not just capturing nice images, which I am reasonably comfortable with, but actually finding threads that turn those images into something cohesive, something that has a point of view rather than just a sequence. The technical side of image acquisition has become fairly instinctive, in the sense that I can usually get an image I'm pleased with, or at least one I can work with, but the storytelling side is still something I'm learning, because story in this kind of work is rarely a clean matter. It's usually buried in the tone, or in the rhythm, or the way that one image sits next to another, in the difference between what technically happened and what it felt like to be there. And what I found with the fishing project was that a voiceover, when it's done with a bit of restraint, can be surprisingly powerful. Not because it explains everything, and certainly not because it tells the viewer what to feel, but because it gives shape to something that might otherwise remain a bit loose. And so I tried to do the same thing here, in a much smaller way, writing a few lines, rewriting them, stripping them back, trying to find something that felt like it belonged to the footage, rather than just sitting on top of it. And I tried to allow the words to do just enough to give the piece a spine, without flattening it into a neat explanation. And because this wasn't for anyone else, it didn't have to be perfect, which is always liberating. It was a small thing, made relatively quickly, from a morning that didn't need to become anything else. And yet the process of making it felt valuable, because it reminded me that not every piece of work has to be optimized to within an inch of its life. If this is resonating, if you recognize the instinct to keep moving, keep cutting, keep compressing things until they become the most efficient version of themselves, then please consider subscribing, because it helps the channel find the people it's actually for. And it means that the next time I put something like this out, there's a reasonable chance it will find its way back to you. And if you want a bit more of the in-between, the bits that don't always make it into finished pieces, the fragments of shoots and tests and processes that sit around the edge of the main videos, I put as much as possible of that on Instagram, where I'm Jack filmed. Something that really helped with this particular piece, almost a bit unexpectedly, was constraint. Because working with a single focal length, in this case the excellent Thypoch Simera-C 35mm, meant that I wasn't constantly thinking about alternatives or wondering whether I should be a little wider, a little tighter, slightly more practical, slightly more covered, slightly safer. There was no zooming, no swapping lenses, no hedging my bets. I just had a single point of view and whatever I could find within it, which is quite a nice way to work when you're trying to slow down, because the fewer options you have, the less time you spend negotiating with yourself and convincing yourself. And that really is one of the things I love about that lens. Beyond the character of it, beyond the way it renders, beyond all the usual gear-related language that we reach for when we're trying to explain why something feels nice. Because what it really does, for me at least, is remove that noise from the process. It gives me a way of seeing that feels natural and human. Not too wide, not too compressed, just enough of the world to understand where you are, while still feeling close enough to people and details so that it doesn't become distant. I try to be fairly measured when it comes to gear endorsements, partly because I think it's very easy in this area of YouTube to become excited about whatever happens to be in front of you that week, and partly because I'm always wary of the gear becoming the point rather than the work it helps you make. But the Simera-C 35mm really does earn my endorsement. For what it costs, I think it's a bit of a standout, and while people do compare these lenses favourably to things like the Cooke SP3s, which is obviously very high praise and not a comparison I'm able to make having never used them, it does give you a sense of the kind of character people are responding to. If you're curious about it, I'll put a link in the description to the official Thypoch store, which is generally where you'll find the best price, and there's a small discount with the code JackFilmed if you do end up going that route. More importantly though, it isn't really about the lens as a product. It's about what it makes easier. It makes it easier to commit, easier to stop fiddling, easier to stand somewhere and let the frame do its work. And in this particular case, that was exactly what I needed, because the whole exercise was about resisting the temptation to keep moving. The other thing that was quite revealing was the camera choice, because I didn't bring the Komodo X, partly because I had a commercial job the next day. I didn't really want to risk my main camera on what had, in my mind, a non-zero chance of ending up getting very wet. And also because this didn't really need that level of kit. So I shot the whole thing on the Sony ZV-E1, held in a way that encouraged me to move more deliberately. And once again, it reminded me that the camera itself is often less important than the surrounding decisions. It's the lens, it's the rigging, it's the way you hold the camera, the way you move, the subject, the light, the willingness to stay with something slightly longer than you otherwise would. And although the camera obviously matters to a certain extent, because, I mean, of course it does, I increasingly think it's only one part of a much larger chain. And if you showed me the finished footage without context and told me that it had come from a more expensive, more cinema camera, I would definitely believe you. And not because the ZV-E1 has magically become something else, but because the choices around it are doing a lot of the work. I think that this hopefully ties back to my original point, because slowing things down is not just an editing decision, or a shooting decision, or a philosophical position. It's a practical change in behaviour. It's choosing not to move on quite yet. It's letting a shot run past the moment where it first becomes usable. It's making a piece that is a few minutes long when your instinct would normally be to turn it into 30 seconds. It's accepting that not every second has to be the most efficient second possible. All of the footage you've been seeing throughout this video came from that day, much of it from the same pool of material that became the little film, plus a little bit of drone footage for context. So rather than keep talking around it, I think it probably makes sense to just show you what that experiment turned into. And again, this isn't a grand piece of work, it isn't a big documentary, it isn't a carefully planned short film. It's just a small thing made from a morning on the water. And I think that's the thing I like the most about it, because normally I'd have made this 30 seconds long, and this time I didn't. So let me show you. Some trips carry more than miles. We left Falmouth aboard the Penarrow, headed for Mevagissey in the calm of the morning. The day began simply enough, lines cast off, the harbour falling away behind us, breakfast on deck, mugs in hand, a sort of easy routine that belongs to working boats and early starts. There was no great drama to it, just the steady business of getting underway. We were headed to collect Gertrude. Once, she worked these waters as a lifeboat, built for service, for weather, for hard use, for the kind of work that asks a great deal of a boat, and the people aboard her. She had that look about her still. She felt like a vessel shaped by purpose. There's something about old lifeboats. Even when their working lives have changed, they seem to hold on to a little of what they were built for. Not drama, exactly, and not nostalgia either, just a sense that they were made to go afloat properly, and to matter when they did. From Mevagissey, JB brought Gertrude clear of the harbour and turned for Falmouth. She only had one working engine, though that was all we needed. Once we were out and settled, the day took on that simple rhythm that so many good passages do. Engine note, the coast sliding by, everyone falling into the work of it, without much needing to be said. And what followed was straightforward enough. Sea, engine, coastline, and a steady run back. Boats like this seem to carry something with them, some trace of their former life, a sense of duty almost. It doesn't quite leave when the job itself is over. And perhaps that's what gave the trip its shape. On paper, it was a collection and a delivery. In reality, it felt like something gentler than that, and more interesting besides. A working boat moving into a new chapter under her own steam, on her own lines, with the coast she once knew still close at hand. By the time Falmouth came into view, it felt like more than a delivery. A boat, a crew, and a passage home. And that's it, really. A very small piece of work about a group of people going to collect a slightly broken boat, with no real drama, no great jeopardy in the end, no huge transformation, no satisfying twist beyond the fact that it worked and we got home, which I suppose in old boat terms is actually quite enough. And I think that's why I like it, because it doesn't really do all the things that we've become very good at making things do. It doesn't grab you by the collar, it doesn't have a hook, it doesn't constantly escalate, it doesn't keep reminding you that it deserves your attention. It simply sits there for a few minutes and allows you to be in that moment for slightly longer than you otherwise would have been, which in its own very modest way feels very valuable to me. Not because every piece of work should be like that, because clearly it shouldn't, and I'm not about to stop making short, sharp, social first work, because that's my job basically, and I enjoy the discipline of it. But also, I'm getting better at remembering that there are other speeds available. There is value in holding the shot. There is value in letting a sequence breathe. There is value in making something a little longer than it strictly needs to be, simply because the extra time gives it room to become something else. And that, I think, is the part I want to keep practicing, because the skills I've already built are speed, and I don't want to lose that, but I do want to become better at choosing when not to use it. Speed's really useful, but it shouldn't be automatic. Efficiency is really useful, until it starts dictating choices for you. And if you, like me, are in danger of spending all your time making the shortest possible version of everything, eventually you risk forgetting what happens when you let something stay on screen for a little longer. So that's what I'm trying to do at the moment. Not slow motion, not nostalgia, absolutely not a rejection of fast work, just slowing the process down enough to notice what I might otherwise have missed. I'm Jack. Whatever this is, I'm calling Western Approaches. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.